Hello, and welcome back to the video lecture series for Philosophy 119, Ethical Leadership, offered through the Pennsylvania State University. I'm Dr. William Behun. In this session, we'll begin to examine the ethical principles outlined in a classic of Western ethical thinking, Immanuel Kant's Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals. This somewhat strange title actually gives us a hint as to how Kant understands what he calls practical philosophy, or ethics. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. Practical philosophy is practical not in the sense opposed to theoretical, but rather that it has to do with praxis, what we actually do in our lives. Ultimately, the question of all practical philosophy is, what ought I to do? Now, before we go on, it's probably a good idea to define a couple of key terms in Kant's vocabulary. We'll start with two of the most problematic, a priori and a posteriori. These Latin terms designate different kinds or propositions or forms of knowledge. A priori knowledge is that which comes directly from reason itself, not from our experience of the world. A priori knowledge is abstract and formal. It isn't derived from anything that we've seen or tasted or touched or apprehended through any of our senses. Now, this may be a little hard to understand at first. What kind of knowledge could we have without experience? Let's take a simple example. In geometry, we make claims about the properties of parallel lines, such as parallel lines will never intersect. But how do we know that? We've never actually seen an infinitely long pair of one-dimensional lines running parallel to each other. And even if we had, we wouldn't be able to say for certain that they never intersect until we had traveled over their entire length, which is infinite, so that's impossible. And yet, we know that our claim is true. It's something that we know a priori. It doesn't require us to have ever seen parallel lines, or even for there to be parallel lines in reality. A posteriori knowledge, on the other hand, is knowledge that we get from experience. If I say that oranges are sweet, or that Jim is a nice guy, or the Earth goes around the sun once every 365.26 days, all of these are a posteriori statements. They tell me about specific individuals that exist in the real world, oranges, Jim, or the solar year. A priori statements are the form of knowledge. X plus X equals 2X, and this is true for any X. A posteriori statements give us the content of knowledge. 2 plus 2 equals 4. These deal with specific examples. Now, we'll stop to clarify some additional terms as we go on. In order to understand the place of ethics for Kant, we need to see where it lies within the broad perspective of philosophy. For Kant, practical philosophy is one of three branches of philosophy. The others are logic and physics. Logic is purely formal. Physics and ethics, on the other hand, each have an a priori and an a posteriori element. In physics, the a posteriori part describes the working of things in the natural world. The a priori part deals with the fundamental laws of nature. In ethics, the a posteriori part is called practical anthropology, and it's a description of what people believe to be right and wrong, or a description of how they behave ethically. The a priori part, with which we'll be dealing, is the metaphysic of morals. It tells us how people ought to behave, even if they never fulfill that obligation. This distinction is particularly important for Kant, because we can never move from a posteriori statements like the Bible and the law tell us that murder is wrong, to a priori statements like one ought never to commit murder. Even if everyone believes something, there's always the chance that they could all be wrong. So in order to really figure out right and wrong, we have to find something that we can know a priori. In our next session, we'll see how Kant begins to lay out precisely this project.